Hello everybody and welcome back to the Kingdom Hearts HD Dream Drop Distance playthrough. It is time to head into Prankster's Paradise, and there should be a very, very recognisable giant frickin' whale on that world that should be very, very familiar to anybody who has played the Kingdom Hearts franchise over the years. Because of course it is Monstro. And this is Pinocchio's world. And actually, it's really quite exciting because obviously the previous times that the Pinocchio film has been in Kingdom Hearts in any fashion has been just Monstro. This is the first time that we actually get to experience something completely new from Pinocchio, and it's delightful because it's easily the most interesting bit of the film. Also, probably the darkest bit of the film, actually, if you ask me. But still, in our dive, we've got the delightful challenge of breaking 150 balloons. Basically, you don't have to do the diving strike in order to hit these balloons. It is just it sort of speeds you up, I suppose, a little bit, maybe, as you're descending, but it can make it difficult to hit everything. So, actually, it's probably better for you if you are just diving as you would do normally, and then instead of doing the charge, doing like the dodge and deflect, because that way, you know, you get to move through quite a lot more balloons in one fell swoop. And yeah, it's basically why this is not going as quickly as it perhaps should do for me. Because yeah, you can break a lot more balloons like that, and also you really should aim for hitting the bigger bunches whenever you get the opportunity, because yeah, otherwise it's just not going to be great for you. And yeah, that was definitely a silver diver rank. Oh boy.
Wow.
That Pinocchio. He must have his poor father worried sick. Still, that little fella's some miracle. Imagine, Mr. Geppetto's wooden puppet brought to life by the Blue Fairy. She made his wish for a son come true because he's given so much happiness to others. Now Pinocchio needs me to guide him and be his conscience. So maybe, one day, he can be a real... Well, now, let's not get ahead of ourselves, Jiminy. First, you gotta go find Pinocchio.
Huh? Hey, Jiminy, what's up?
Who are you? You shouldn't be here, young man.
What? Are you okay, Jiminy?
Huh? You mean you've heard of me? Well, I'll be. The name Jiminy Cricket's already spread far and wide.
Really? You feeling all right? It's me, Sora.
Sora, you say? Gosh, I don't think I recognize you, but the name does have a familiar ring.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we definitely need this flashback right now to explain why Jiminy doesn't know who we are, and it's clearly because Sora's being a daft idiot, let's put it that way.
Real time does not flow. Unless one restores the world by waking it from its slumber, it will stay locked in a dream forever. Thus, you may encounter familiar faces, but they are just figments of the dream. In actuality, they are sound asleep, trapped within a world that is also sleeping. What's more, whilst someone may no longer dwell in the real version of a world, dreams may paint a fuller picture, and restore what seems to be missing.
The real Jiminy Cricket wasn't trapped in this world, so maybe it's like the dream world's putting him back where he belongs.
What's that? I can't hear you.
Right. It's very nice to meet you, Jiminy.
Well, sure. The feeling's mutual, Sora.
Oh yeah. So, how come you said I need to get out of here?
You can't fool me. You still think we know each other. And you've just about got me thinking it, too. But where was I? Oh, yes. This is a terrible place. Boys here are allowed to wreck things and loaf around and make jack-a-mules of themselves. And poor lost Pinocchio. He wandered in here on my watch. That's right. That's where I must have heard your name, Sora. From my friend Pinocchio.
He knows me? But how?
And we get another flashback! Like, so many flashbacks at the start of this. It's just like,
Shame on you,
cutscene after cutscene after cutscene! Good grief.
Goofing off in a place like this?
I'm sorry, Jiminy. I was going to school till I met somebody. Yeah, two big monsters with big green eyes. Huh?
Oh, you don't say. And then what happened?
They tied me in a big sack. Oh,
Sounds like you were horsing around.
but I snuck off when they weren't looking. My nose! What's happened?
There. You see where those tall tales will get you?
But it's all true. Even the fella in the black clothes who said to play a trick on Sora.
What? Now who was he? I've had just about enough of your fibbing. Hold on. I guess that part was true. Tell me, Pinocchio, did that man in black say anything else to you?
He sure didn't.
Well, good.
Hey, look at that.
That star again. The Blue Fairy.
Why, Pinocchio? What has happened to your nose?
Oh,
Perhaps you haven't been telling the truth, Pinocchio. Sir Jiminy?
Well, you see, Your Honor, Miss Fairy.
oh, please help me. I'm awful sorry.
You see, Pinocchio, a lie keeps growing and growing until it's as plain as the nose on your face.
I'll never lie again. Honest, I won't.
I'll forgive you this once. But remember, a boy who won't be good might just as well be made of wood.
We'll be good, won't we?
Very well. But this is the last time I can help you.
That guy again.
Forget him. If I don't find Pinocchio, he'll turn into a donkey like the rest of the boys.
Right. Then let me help you find him, Jiminy.
Really? I'd be grateful. But how in the world do you know Pinocchio?
Oh, hey! Over there! I see him!
Gosh, that is Pinocchio.
All aboard, Jiminy.
Take it away!
And so we begin our time in Prankster's Paradise, and I mean, just by virtue of being a nice, big, colourful open area, it's immediately better than Monstro ever was. And I mean, this opening area, the amusement park, is just really delightfully, awesomely big. Obviously, there's not necessarily a huge amount to do in here, but there's a lot you can flow motion off of. There's a number of battles you can get into. It's just quite fun, and definitely after dealing with the grids, this just feels a lot more open and exciting and makes me quite happy. So obviously we've had a few new voice actors back into the fray now. So Jiminy Cricket, the delightful Jiminy Cricket, is here voiced by Phil Snyder, who obviously took over from Eddie Carroll after his passing, doing Recoded and then Dream Drop Distance. But then following Dream Drop Distance, Phil Snyder ceased to be the voice of Jiminy Cricket. Don't quite know why. I think it looks like he might have retired from acting in 2014, and so the role of Jiminy Cricket then got taken over by Joe Ockman, who did some of the voice work in the recoded cinematics in Kingdom Hearts HD 2.5 remix, which I guess I might have talked about when we did Recoded. I don't know whether I officially did or not. I apologise if not. Largely because I don't know what he did and did not voice in that. We'll see. It'll be a lot easier to tell as soon as we get to Kingdom Hearts 3, because it will just be Joe Ockman, as long as there's not another voice actor who takes over the role. When it comes to Pinocchio himself, he is voiced by Nick Carson, who I can't really find anything on. In the original Kingdom Hearts, Pinocchio was voiced by Seth Adkin, but yeah, you can't really find much about any of them, well, either of them, on the internet, so that's fine. I'd say Nick Carson does a very good Pinocchio job. It's great. And then in terms of the Blue Fairy, who we saw, she appears to be voiced by Rosalind Landor, who seems to have voiced the character since pretty much Disney's House of Mouse. I can't really find a lot of work with Rosalind Landor that I would recognise. I mean, yeah, she's been in some films and so on and so forth. She was in a film version of Jane Eyre and a few other things, and I think mostly just does voice work for Disney and audiobooks as she goes. So she pretty much is still the voice of the Blue Fairy from what I can tell, but it varies. But what's actually quite interesting, this is something that I didn't realise, and I'm just bringing it up whilst I'm here, is the Blue Fairy, as she appears in Disney's Pinocchio. In the original story, she's actually the fairy with turquoise hair. In Carlo Collodi's The Adventures of Pinocchio. And so, yeah, so rather than being a fairy who wears blue, she's actually got blue turquoise hair, just to make her, odd. But I do think that the Blue Fairy of Disney's Pinocchio is probably the one that has stood the test of time a lot more. And even though she's not necessarily the most interesting character, she is definitely an important figure, shall we say, in Pinocchio's story. And yeah, what I really do quite like is that with this renditioning of Pinocchio, obviously it takes place on Pleasure Island, which, as I said before, in Kingdom Hearts 1 we only got to experience Monstro. In all the games since then, it's only ever been Monstro. And so it's really nice to be able to get to experience another part of the Pinocchio story that's definitely a lot more interesting. And even though, from what I remember, actually, Pleasure Island isn't really that big of a part of the film. Like, I mean, the film's only 88 minutes long, so you spend a bit of time setting up Pinocchio becoming a thing. Then you've got Stromboli's puppet show and all of that. and then you've got Pleasure Island, and then you've got Monstro. So it's only a really small part of the story, but it's definitely the most interesting location in the film, and it's what makes me actually really quite glad that they did come back to Pinocchio and put this in there, because it's a nice way of doing that whole thing of showing us something that we know but doing it differently. Because if you look at pretty much all of the previous Kingdom Hearts games, well, all of the sequels, shall we say, where they've returned to an idea, you've pretty much experienced exactly the same areas, just maybe adding in 1 or 2 extra rooms. Nothing too grandiose. But obviously in Dream Drop Distance, in the, well, I will say for now 2 worlds that they brought back. There may or may not be another world that comes back, which we will see later on. But they really do expand into all these different areas. So Prankster's Paradise is sort of the bigger example of it, in that effectively they created a whole brand new world for you to explore. Traverse Town obviously has about 3 or 4 really big new areas to go through, and then the other world that I'm not mentioning, that may or may not exist at the end of this entire game, is just completely different to how we experienced it in the game it may or may not have appeared in originally. So yeah, it's just really awesome, and yeah, I do really quite like Prankster's Paradise. It's a lot of fun, and I do really like the music in Prankster's Paradise. It's really great. It's just nice and bouncy and captures everything that it needs to. So I mean, the field theme is the fun fair. There's also a very small wish, which I think we'll hear later. And then the back theme is Prankster's Party, and sort of the nice and bouncy, and definitely after the darker tones of the grid, it's nice to return to this much more joyous feel. And kind of following on from that, I would say that's probably another reason why I do feel that the grid ends up being the oddball world in Dream Drop Distance, because all of the other worlds have these very joyous, well, they feel very joyous, and I can't believe that I didn't see that chest. Ugh. Yeah, that whole thing of being big, colourful, bright, exciting, and just the music's joyous and wonderful, and you really feel like stuff's happening, and just exploring the world feels like a joy. But when the music isn't quite so exciting, it's not quite so wonderful.
There you are.
Which I think is why the grid ends up suffering for me a little bit. But yeah, that's not Pinocchio.
Dream Eaters!
That is, I believe, a Nightmare Jesterbocchi.
One way to solve this problem.
And they're not too horrendous, really. Just gotta just gotta murder them. It's pretty standard. It's what we do for all Dream Eaters that are nightmares, which is fine by me. And I like how this is called Flamethrower, but it's basically more Flame Wheel than Flamethrower. They really should have named that better, but then maybe they thought that Nintendo would go for them for copyright or something. It's Speaking of which, at the time that I'm actually doing this commentary, Nintendo very recently announced that they were ending the Nintendo Creators Program and just in general relaxing their policies with regards to monetization of their games, which doesn't affect me anymore because I don't make money off my playthroughs anymore like I used to. But it's really, really awesome that they've finally made that move,
Those
because
dream eaters were pretending to be
it's getting with the
Pinocchio.
times.
So,
Like,
then where's the
this
real
is what
Pinocchio?
people do these days. So, allowing people to do playthroughs like this, as long as they're talking over them, that's the key. They want you to transform the work. So it very much has to be fair use for you to be able to monetize it. If you just upload straight gameplay, that's breaking the rules, which, while that will make it frustrating for some of us in terms of accessing bits and pieces of content, in general, it makes more sense in terms of protecting copyright and all of that jazz. So really, what Nintendo have done, it's taken them a long while to get to the point, but really I would say that that's pretty much the blueprint that I would say most video game companies should go with in terms of actually working with copyright and YouTube and people doing Let's Plays of this ilk. Because really, it just makes sense. And it's fair, and it's working with the times, and it's that whole thing of, unless, you know, someone's being, like, really, really not positive about a game, it is pretty much free advertisement. Apart from those instances where you...
Another imposter.
how shall I put it? Apart from those instances where it's a game where the story is
Well, sure.
it,
If that's really him.
Don't give
and
up,
so
Jiminy.
watching the story means you don't want to experience the game and therefore you don't buy it, but then you might not have bought it anyway because you're watching a playthrough in order to see whether you want to buy it. That whole quite complex idea, and oh yeah, we are in the money, get in there. Now, something that I have just noticed, which is actually really quite nice and awesome, is that originally Prankster's Paradise, in the way it is here, was meant to appear in Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days, but it was eventually removed due to space restrictions. Tetsuya Nomura explained that the planned plot for the world was set in a circus, so maybe not quite Prankster's Paradise, but pretty close. It might have been like Stromboli's whole thing, totally fair. And the whole idea was to play off the story of Pinocchio, a puppet with a heart, and the nobodies who possess no hearts themselves. Planning for a sad episode with Roxas and Shion looking for hope for themselves, which actually I think that would have been a really, really good idea, and I think that that would have been a really good way of making use of that world and that story, and I think it's more effective than what ultimately gets done here, because you've got all that theming going on, and that's really quite fascinating. The book was apparently going to include Pinocchio as a human, just weird. And it was, well, it was going to have Geppetto, obviously, but it was also going to have the villains Honest John and Gideon, who are like a fox and a cat type deal. And the profile sprites for all of the characters are in the game's final data. In the final game's data, I should say. Get it proper way round. On the DS, but obviously it is not playable. It's not like when the Jungle Book nearly turned up in Birth by Sleep, where through hacking you were able to access the world and see the bits that they had implemented before, obviously, it got shunted out of the whole shebang. And these guys are being a pain. I believe these are the Ice Gwinaces, or Ice Gwins? Basically ice penguins, despite the fact that penguins already, you know, live on ice. That's their habitat. But hey, not gonna complain over much. What I will, however, say is, if anybody ever wants to moan about corridors, this is your time to moan, because this is just one big freaking corridor, and it just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. And the way that you experience this particular area is that you have to go all the way to the end. Once you're done at that point, you come all the way back down, which, as I said, is not necessarily the best of ways of getting through these things. But hey, it's a really nice corridor, so I can totally give it that. And I do really like the little animated bits floating around everywhere. Obviously, in the like La Cité de Cloche with the Topsy-Turvy Day, Feast of Fools, that was a little bit depressing because there were no people about. Whereas here, while there are no people about and no lads turning into donkeys, you do have all these little cardboard cutouts of marionettes, which do make it feel a little bit more populated than it would perhaps otherwise be. And what's also quite nice about this is that there's a relatively proper platforming challenge. Like, Kingdom Hearts in general doesn't have many major platforming challenges. I mean, it would be pretty awful if it did. But this is like a proper platforming challenge to collect the 2 chests that you can in here. Although you can completely cheese it by doing that. But hey, at least it's there for you to be able to do if you want to. And yes, good, I am going the right direction. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to tell which way you're supposed to go, but because the map does give you where you entered the room, that does mean that it's a lot easier to figure out exactly where you're supposed to be going. But yeah, basically we're just working our way to the circus bit, the big tent, or the big top, or whatever you want to call it. And once we get there, then we'll go on our journey around the other bits and bobs. And I will say, I really like Sparkra. It's not the best move in the world, in the sense that it does take a while to launch the attack, by which point someone can an enemy can very, very, very quickly knock you out of it, and therefore it's just completely wasted. But it is pretty powerful and a really good area of effect move, so if you've got a bunch of enemies surrounding you and you manage to pull it off, then it's just really effective at wiping them out. And I do really like that. Also, now's probably a good time for a drop knot. So I really do hope that I make use of one, because otherwise I'm going to be... oh, you see, just as I say it, past me was thinking these things. And that's a nice fun little shadow puppet thing. It sort of puts me in mind of like the 7 Dwarfs from Snow White. Obviously it's not them, but it's a nice little mini reference to that, and that's all good. But here we go.
Pinocchio!
Jiminy! Help me, Jiminy!
Oh, my stars above! We've got to do something!
Okay, I got it covered.
an oak. Look at you.
I think for now, you two better get out of here.
So, we now get a really fun fight on trampolines! It's a bit weird. Basically, you can bounce and then bounce the enemies up, at which point they can't do anything and you can get more stuns on them. Equally, they can bounce and sort of stun you a little bit, but really, you are very much more in the advantage for this particular fight. So, really, just go ham on these guys. And also, you know, if you get the chance, you might as well go and trapeze your way over to this chest, because you're in this bit anyway, you might as well pick that up. I thought I was being clever with doing that, because I thought, oh, maybe I don't get to come back. No, you definitely do. It's a very easy room to get into and get around. But whilst I was in here, I thought might as well just get that. It makes sense. And yeah, then it's just a case of just murdering all the Dream Eaters, and we're good to go. It's been annoying that we don't get our party member Dream Eaters in here in this fight, because obviously they would help out, but it's nothing particularly horrendous. It's just that these Kuma Pandas are red because they're angry, I think? I don't really know, but for some reason they're red until they're not. They're weird, I don't get it, but it's fine, they're all gonna die, so I can live with that.
You again? Xemnas? This isn't possible.
My. A hollow puppet that's managed to grow a heart. Just imagine that.
Pinocchio isn't anything like you nobodies. But if Pinocchio could be given one, shouldn't you be able to have a heart inside you too?
Maybe so. However, do not forget that you yourself are not so very different from us.
How am I anything like a nobody? That doesn't make any sense.